We have an amazing group of women here today, and I've loved the energy being in this room all day today. And I think it's great that you're all connected through Harvard. Harvard has a very special place in our family. When I got my master's there, I met my husband, who was at the business school. Then we sent 2 of our children to Harvard Business School, and each of them met their spouses. So we're very connected to the university, and I always love the fact that Harvard elevates the conversation, provides a transformational experience, and tries to keep connected with its alums around the world. Today, I'm fortunate enough to lead this panel on leadership in the new economy. And I think leadership is always a very important topic in our world. I have, as my panelists, 2 real role models as leaders in Danita and in Rita. And so I'm going to just jump right in and start sort of asking some questions. I thought I'd start by talking about the new economy. And of course, technology is at the very core of the new economy. And it's affected our businesses in so many ways. I mean, for example, new businesses are being created almost daily because of the technology. The company my son and I co-founded, Checking Capital Advisors, we couldn't have founded that company even 10 years ago. So we use cutting-edge technology. And so many other companies are like that. I bet BioIQ is very much that way. Also, the technology is very disruptive of our economy. You think about what Uber has done to the regular taxi cab companies. And then technology even has come into play with very traditional mainline industries, changing the way they do business. So my first question is, what in technology has surprised you in doing business in this new technology? And Rita, I'll start with you, because when we talked on the phone, Rita had an idea about this that I thought was interesting.
Well, technology and healthcare are in some ways almost an oxymoron, especially when you put leadership with it, because healthcare has been very slow to the party. And part of that is just because of the industry itself, at least in the US, the way it's organized. It's a lot of mom and pop. You know, even your local community hospital, that's not a big corporation. It's relatively small. And it takes a lot of resources to change from a more paper-based kind of system to a technology platform. And so healthcare has been slow to come to the party, but now with the ACA, Accountable Care, Obamacare, and some of the other government programs to help doctors and providers introduce electronic medical records into their practices, there's really been an acceleration of the adoption of technology. But it's more of a catch-up in many ways. I remember when I used to speak about health technology in the late 90s, I would say that when I went to take my car in for service, they could pull up my service record. I didn't have to fill out any paperwork. They knew exactly what had happened to my car. They could put some, cables into it and get readouts and know, what needed to be done. When I went to my doctor's office, I had to fill out that same piece of paper. And it hasn't changed until very recently. And some doctors, it hasn't changed, or hospitals. So it has been a slow uptake. But what has happened now with the Accountable Care Act coming online, and really it's all motivated by the aligning of incentives to accept technology. And it's very simple that doctors aren't going to be paid as much if they see Medicare patients particularly and haven't converted to electronic medical records, and they're not meeting certain standards in information processing. And the same with hospitals. If they're not using technology to see who is coming in and coming out of their facility, all at once that revolving door that always paid so well, if somebody's readmitted within 30 days and they're covered by Medicare, that's a net loss for that hospital. You have to really keep track of care processes, start connecting the data dots in healthcare. And my little company, we started out as a health improvement company that managed data for all these partners. And what we realized, there was lots of silos, data silos, and there was no interconnection between the hospital, the doctors, the laboratories, the pharmacies. Everyone operated. They may have had some data systems, but none of them talked to each other. And using internet and cloud-based data warehousing, we were able to be that connector, that integrator, and we're still doing that, and largely with employers now too, where the employer is doing much more to promote wellness among the employees, and so we connect employees to their physicians, to scheduling their labs. The employee gets a lab report through the internet. We do all those little touch points of communication and data that has really kept healthcare, I'd say, disconnected and also not as effective as it can be when you start connecting the dots. And we all hear about big data now, and you can't have big data if it's little bits of data in a lot of little silos. So now we're finally seeing ways for the data to come together, to be analyzed across entire enterprises, across communities, and hopefully it's going to help all of us in terms of really understanding what are some of the root causes of disease, how we can get up front, do more prevention, and I see some very positives. But going back, healthcare is not a leader in technology at all. We're really kind of late to the game, and very diligent now in trying to play catch up.
So Rita, I have a sales week for you. I was picking up a prescription about a month ago for my husband at a large retailer, and I could not believe they were still using fax machines. They were literally waiting for fax orders to come over from doctors' offices before, and I thought to myself, how backwards is this? And this was a large drugstore. It's very surprising. So a lot of opportunity, I think, to catch up in healthcare.
And Danita, for you, has technology impacted your business in a way that surprised you?
Technology has impacted our business, and I'll give an example of something personal and then talk about our corporation. Personally, I think we all expected technology to help us improve our productivity. We could do more now with less, that we had these handheld devices and all these applications that would help us manage our time. And what I found is that the expectation has increased for us just to do a lot more work. So we're accessible 24/7, people are constantly reaching out, and the expectation is that we all operate with this high degree of sense of urgency. And so while we are more productive, we can do more with less, the more has just continued to expand. So I think that has been a surprise for me. From a corporation standpoint, working at a natural gas distribution company, we have meter readers that would go out and read meters every single month to be able to appropriately charge you for your gas usage. Well, now we have advanced meters that can do this automatically, and we are saving money on, as far as labor is concerned. We're taking vehicles off the road from an emission standpoint. And most importantly, we're allowing the consumer to be able to better manage their energy usage. So that's been a real win, but it's definitely shifted our model as to how we deliver our service and how we measure the usage of our product.
Right, and I think when we talked on the phone, you said that actually consumers could go online.
Yes, they absolutely
and check the usage during the month, and so cut back or...
Absolutely. So we're on a conservation campaign around energy, and so if you are informed about your energy usage, you can help to control it and manage it, and also manage your cost.
Right. Well, as we've talked all day, we're in the middle of a communication revolution. And of course, with all of the communication that we have today is stuff that we didn't even dream of even 5 years ago. And so I wonder, there's a lot of talk about social media. What role does social media play in your company, Danita?
It's a huge role. All of a sudden, I think the panel earlier mentioned, it becomes a conversation. So people can start to express their pleasures or displeasures with your company, your products, or your service, and the expectation is that you will be there to react and to respond. So a lot of times you try to be as proactive as possible and push your messages out, but oftentimes you'll find yourselves reacting, and so you have to be prepared and often anticipate what are the potential scenarios that may come to you so that you can be very smart when it hits you. So if there is an incident where we have an outage in a particular area, we can use social media proactively to communicate with those impacted residents, to tell them what the problem is, how quickly we can turn it around, and answer any questions they may have. So social media has been a great tool in that way. But it also can be a tool when something happens and it's kind of a resident has an issue or they're unhappy. All of a sudden this resident or customer has an audience, and we've got to be there to address their issue in a timely fashion where we demonstrate we're empathetic, we're sensitive, and we're very responsive. So it's been an interesting phenomenon because social media is still relatively new, and we're still trying to figure out kind of how to deal with it. We had an incident not too long ago where it was a big incident to deal with, and the question was, do we stop and pull back some of our other messages that we've been communicating, or do we focus on that? So the issues are still very relatively new that we're kind of learning to deal with, but we're taking it one day at a time, and right now I think it's been a big win for the business. I think the team has handled it very well.
Great. And Rita, I know when we talked about social media, you sort of talked about how through BioIQ, people could personalize, take more responsibility for their health care. What about that?
Well, definitely that's an important aspect of health now, is just coming up with more tools for people to help maintain their health, to help measure, know your numbers, and then to have some impact on your personal health behaviors. And there is a social component to that, but it's kind of a tough, it's a slippery slope, because in healthcare, personal health information is some of the information that we are extremely private about, that we want high levels of security to protect. And so anything you do in the social media realm has to take that into account. So we do a lot to protect the sharing of information, be it from a provider like a lab, to get a lab report to you so you can see what those numbers are, and to interpret what a high cholesterol reading might be, and maybe even help you take some action. But what we're seeing with corporations, and even with some very progressive health plans, is there are ways to have people select into competitions. And Weight Watchers has been tremendously successful in helping people lose weight. That's a very social activity. So we're seeing other very social activities that you can do on the web using social media. So a company may have employees all over the country, but they can all join the Let's Lose Weight competition, or Let's Walk 1,000 Steps a Day competition, and there might be some ways then that's measured and verified, but those kinds of activities where you're doing competition, or privacy of the personal information is still protected, but what you choose to make public and share to either motivate yourself or motivate your colleagues, those things can contribute to a social media platform that hopefully helps change behaviors.
Great. This communication revolution is not just about communicating. Now marketing has taken on a whole new arm and is so much more important. And in fact, in some ways, I'd argue that the consumer is actually driving the bus on a lot of the social media. I would use the example of Nike shoes. Before you would step into the Nike store, pick what shoes were available off the shelf and buy it that way. Now you can go on Nike's website, pick out the type of shoe you want, custom colorize it, even put your initials on it, see it from the back, see it from the top, see it from the side. You're actually, as a consumer, participating in the design process of a product. So how has this change of customization and marketing changed have you felt it in your business? the idea of now communication is much more about customization. Denise?
So kind of twofold. One is just in our ability to deliver specific custom information to our residents about their usage, but also we've developed apps that can communicate with residents about when their bill is due, how much it is, and they can set kind of the alerts that they want to be able to receive it, when they want to receive it. So it really allows us to offer a more customized set of services that are meaningful to the customer. So everybody won't receive it. You receive it if you decide to opt in and you want this information. So it's been very helpful as another outreach to our residents.
Right, that's great. And Rita, anything?
Well, a big part of what BioIQ, our little startup, does is biometric testing. And most of that's traditionally been done in the lab, where there's not a lot of customization. You make the appointment, you go in, they prick your finger, and they draw blood. And what we've done is given consumers, and primarily through their employer, so this is mostly employee wellness sponsored, but they can choose to schedule a lab, and we'll do that scheduling online for them. So they go to one website, they elect that they want to go to a lab, or they want to just go to their doctor's office. We can do that scheduling, and we handle the transfer then of information. And some doctors, it still is the fax, but we can do that where the information flows back and forth via whatever channel is available. We also can have people scheduled into an on-site testing where there'll be a health fair, and nurses will come and do biometric testing, so we can schedule them into that. And now with some new partnerships, we can schedule people to pharmacies, because so many pharmacies are getting into the wellness business. So you have one goal, a company wants to have all of their employees involved in biometric testing and get personalized, customized reports that give them some activities and next steps that they can work on based on their health status. But they have 5 ways perhaps to elect to do that. So it's all about making it easier to accomplish something that may have had some barriers for people before. And what has happened, one of our large clients, Boeing, they were getting about 50% participation at their on-site wellness fairs where they were doing biometric testing. With offering a platform of those choices, they're over 90% now of the employees that are participating. So this customization really can make a huge difference just in people opting in and having an opportunity to participate.
It's great.
Kathy, another example that I'll share from a gas company perspective is as we're rolling out, as the industry's rolling out natural gas vehicles, one of the biggest obstacles is infrastructure. People say there are not enough natural gas vehicles refueling stations. Well, we have an app now where you can go online, it's the GPS, and it'll tell you kind of the closest natural gas fueling station. So I anticipate as people start to adopt natural gas vehicles at a quicker pace, we'll start to see that application be used a lot more often.
Right. In our own company, Chucky Capital Advisors, we're a traditional asset manager, but because of the use of technology, we can absolutely customize your portfolio. So say, for example, we'll build a global portfolio, but we'll ask you a lot of questions about your risk tolerance, your age, your objectives, and we can factor all that in. I mean, gone is the day, I think, in portfolio management for where one size fits all. It's very, in our company, it is totally customized to the consumer. I'd also like to touch on globalization, because of course that's another huge topic. And no longer are you just a local company. Now you're competing against people all over the world. And how has that affected BioIQ, Rita?
Well, until just a few years ago, I really thought healthcare was the most local of all industries and services. Sure, there's some, national insurance companies, there's the Mayo Clinics and a few national provider brands, but most of it is really those small local providers. And so it has been a surprise to us in our little company that we're getting inquiries from China. and they want to use our platform, they want to use our services, they want to license our software, and it's primarily being driven by the really devastating health status statistics. Diabetes is growing just phenomenal rate in China, and employers are really becoming very concerned. And it's, as people come from their rural environment to an urban environment, factories where they have little time to prepare food, and they're eating a lot of fast foods, and what happens is it's really having an impact on the health of employees, and as they provide health care, the cost is going up. And so they've, I guess via internet search, they have found us. A lot of concerns about licensing software. You just don't want that to be copied and come back to help your competitors. So we're not jumping in quickly, but it's been very interesting to see. I had been involved when I was with United Health Group and doing acquisitions. We were always looking at primarily Indian companies. So many Indian health providers are American, UK trained, and there was a lot of transference. So I had set up a group in Pune, but I never thought a little company like ours would have this broad application to the Chinese corporate community. So it's really been a surprise, and it does show how small the world really is becoming. For one, that they're seeing those same rates of disease burden that we have here that are troubling to us, but also that they can find us, that they can find a little company in Santa Barbara and know that we're doing something that could help solve some of their challenges.
Interesting. And Danita?
And so I'll speak to this question from my experience at WikiPay, which was a mobile platform that allowed two users to send or receive money using your cell phone. And what we found out that a good proportion of society around the globe are what we consider unbanked, so they don't have a formal relationship with the bank. They can't go to an ATM and withdraw money, but they did have a cell phone. And if we could find a way to have them adopt this platform, they can kind of send and receive money and then move it to a card, if you will, that they could then use as currency at the local stores or retailers. So globalization, or the thought of solving a problem for many different local economies, really played a big role in the business model for WikiPay. So I was there 6 months. I'm no longer there, but I definitely saw the potential in the application.
Yeah, that's interesting. And at our company, Checking Capital Advisors, it was interesting to me that day one we were a global company, because we bought securities, stocks and bonds all over the world. And so we were participating in the global economy. And it's interesting because oftentimes we sort of say we view the world as a gigantic bucket where water or capital is sloshing around from company to company. And we look at it in a very holistic way. So for example, in the 2008 financial crisis, within 1 year, all our portfolios were back 90 cents on the dollar because we were invested throughout the world, and even though the capital flowed out of the US, it flowed into other countries. And it's interesting because as we pull in this data from all over the world, we sort of have a global perspective, even though we're based in Southern California, because we look at the data and we see that growth is not necessarily going to be happening in the US, and we see other economies that are growing and developing, and we can tap into those. I want to sort of shift now and talk about the challenges of leading in this new economy. And of course, I think the biggest challenge is change is so rapid, and the last panel really talked about the rapidity of change. It's not only rapid, it's profound. So I guess my question is, how do you lead when change is so rapid? And Rita, maybe I'll start with you, because as we talked on the phone, I remember you said, at your more traditional companies before, you would have a 10-year strategic plan.
Not that long ago, I would be part of strategic planning efforts, both at United and before that at Verizon, where it was really this long-term horizon. for planning. I think one of the successes of the little startup I'm involved in now is how nimble we are and how unconstrained we are by a plan. Because really, as quickly as things are moving with technology, it's not about seeing into the future and capitalizing on all those opportunities. It's about building core competencies that you think are going to help your customers meet their challenges. And so you really invest in core competencies. I mean, in healthcare, it was sort of a no-brainer. The entities can't communicate with each other, and there's tremendous waste and lack of coordination that costs literally billions of dollars a year. So building the integration capabilities between those various entities was going to solve problems. And so we really developed that in our, we started out on an internet platform, and back in 2005, 2007, that wasn't being done in healthcare. It was still a mainframe kind of environment. But starting out with an internet-based platform, using the cloud, using architecture that was very plug and play with almost any system, all those core competencies have really helped us both weather the ups and downs of the economy, and now to capitalize on some of the needs that are coming about because of the new healthcare reform.
Right, and Danita, how do you lead with all this change?
Well, there's a lot of change in our industry. We're heavily regulated. There are legislation that impacts our business. So I think for us, I kind of think of it, you have to be the champions of innovation, or you become the victims of it, right? And so we constantly try to find ways to create environments where people can be innovative, to anticipate what our consumers want. Everyone's becoming a lot more environmentally conscious, so how can we use natural gas to help clean up the environment as folks shift away from coal to natural gas? How can we be a player in the automobile industry? How can we help to clean up the ports? And so there's a lot of change going on there. So how do we drive it? How do we create space for people to come up with new ideas? How do we reward creativity, or some of the things that we're dealing with? Versus saying, oh, we're just heavily regulated and we can't do anything. It's just really trying to find ways to anticipate what's coming next, but moreover, drive what's coming next. So it's exciting times for utility, I think, where people don't think of change as happening rapidly, but it definitely does.
Right. Another challenge that we all face is that you're never away from work. I mean, between cell phones, IM, texting, emails, you're constantly on call. And I think one huge thing is that there's also the expectation of an immediate response. So how as a leader, how do you deal with this never being away from work? Rita?
Not very well. And I work with primarily, they're very kind, and they say, they may call me mom because they are putting me in the category of their mother. Some of our young technologists, I could be their grandmother. But I think I maybe feel more pressure to stay up with them, and because they're up at 2 a.m., sending along a problem, I feel I have to get back to them. But I also felt that it was important that our management team, especially after we did have some level of success, and it wasn't, the survival of the company depended on just rapidly responding to everything, that we bring some sanity back to the company. And so we've really set some ground rules and put some structure in place about not sending, in a small company, just send it to everybody, reply to everybody. We've really, you're supposed to only escalate to the person that's most likely to help you. You don't need to let everyone in the company know every little thing that's happening. So, those are simple little things, but in a startup, it was important to after kind of a freewheeling, all hands on board to bring some of that structure and include the always-on features that technology provide. We use Google Docs too, which has really been helpful because from any Android device we can get right into everything except personal health information. Nobody can touch that, but just all of our working docs for the company, and that really has helped too, where we almost do chat, where somebody's drafting something and they post it, and so we're using some of the tools to eliminate some levels of meetings. So when we come together for meetings, we already have like a working document that we can use as the
Do you think
basis for
using that
decisions.
chat sort of opens up a little bit the dialogue in terms of, instead of being in a meeting where someone may be hesitant to respond or criticize or add their constructive criticism, do you think it opens up the dialogue?
I think it does. I think people are a little briefer when they're contributing in that kind of a open online environment. And I don't know everyone's experience, but in many years of corporate life, I just spent way too much of that in meetings that weren't always productive for me. And so what we've tried to do is when we bring people together, we have the agenda, we know what the issue is, and we'll have maybe 20-minute meetings instead of 2-hour meetings. So we're using technology in a way that's not that intrusive, but it collects the thoughts and input, and then we really come together to make decisions. There's still a place for face-to-face, and some of that's even via Skype, because not everybody's based here in Santa Barbara. We have people in New York and Florida, in Atlanta, Phoenix, but we utilize the technology, I think, to be efficient, not to just keep everybody, glued to their smartphone.
Danita, how about you?
This is a subject that we spend a lot of time at the executive table talking about in our company, because what we realize is that as great as technology it is, it can drive some pretty bad behaviors. So you see people in a meeting having a face-to-face conversation, constantly checking their phone, which could be considered pretty rude sometimes, but we're all probably guilty of it. And then we've had to create a rule at the dinner table that don't bring your device to the dinner table because we're at the dinner table, right? And then we found out how many people were sleeping with their devices right next to their bed, and I can't get a full night's sleep if my phone is constantly going off in the middle of the night. And we had an executive who was known for sending email messages at 3 in the morning. So I think having boundaries that you have to almost set for yourself, because if you're waiting for the company or your boss or someone else to set it for you, they won't. So you have to figure out what is acceptable to you, what can you live with. And I'm one of those people that I got to get my 8 hours of sleep on most nights, or I'm just evil and grouchy the next day. And my phone, if you looked at it, I'm getting messages throughout the night, and that just cannot be healthy. So either turning it off or down, or you can adjust it so that only certain messages come through depending on their level of urgency. So I think it's really important to try to create a healthy organization, a healthy life, by understanding what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, because what I find is there's so much artificial stress that's out there. It's not even real stress, it's stress that we kind of create ourselves, or that we perceive that something is so urgent. So I think the skills that are required, I think you have to be disciplined, I think you have to be patient, and I think you have to have good judgment about what's important, what's not, what is urgent and what's not, what can wait until tomorrow, what needs to be dealt with today. And if you can't figure that out, you won't be a successful leader in this business, in this new economy.
Right. I think another challenge that we all face is, for the first time ever, 3 generations are working together in the workplace. You've got the baby boomers, and they're 79 million in the baby boomer generation. They're usually 50 to 68. You've got the Gen Xers, they're only 51 million in their generation, and they're 35 to 49. And then of course you've got the millennials, who are 20 to about 32, and again they're 76 million. But for the first time in history, we've got 3 generations in the workforce, and everyone is trying to work together. And I think the challenge here is that people have very different objectives. in even thoughts about what they want in the workplace. There's been a lot written lately about millennials, and I thought it was really interesting as I was kind of reading a couple of articles for this panel. They get a lot of negative press, the millennials. I mean, people call them sort of the trophy generation or the selfish worker sometimes because they're more maybe narcissistic. They're willing to leave a job, quickly if it doesn't stand up to their expectation. And I found a couple of statistics that were pretty interesting, especially about their need for feedback. They said that 80% of the millennials in the workforce wanted regular feedback and mentors, and 87% said that it was important to have a career that bettered the world around them. I also thought it was kind of interesting because they said that 52% of 18 to 25-year-olds texted or emailed their parents daily. And I think this is important for all of us because by 2025, 3 out of every 4 workers in the workforce are going to be millennials. But right now, we're not only dealing with millennials, but we have the older generation, the baby boomers, who are transitioning out of the workforce. So Danita, I know that you and I kind of talked about this transition and
It's a
baby
big
boomers.
issue for us at Southern California Gas. In about 5 years, 50% of our workforce will be retirement eligible. And we've had to think through this. And then when you think about the millennials, a lot of them don't think about being at a company for 20 or 30 years. Their mindset about work is, I'll go do this for 2 to 3 years and then I'll move on. And so our challenge is, how do we transfer the knowledge from the baby boomers to the Gen X and millennials so that we have a qualified workforce that can take us into the next century? And what we're trying to do around retention is to understand how to manage and lead the 3 generations that are present, and they have very different needs. One of the things around knowledge transfers are pairing some of the more senior people with the younger people, and they can do knowledge transfer, and the younger people can teach the older people about the technology. So where can you find matches where there's kind of two-way coaching and two-way mentoring? That's been very effective. We also see the needs being very different. The folks want to come to work and feel like we're changing the world, and they want wellness benefits. They have expectations around the flexibility of work. So from an HR perspective, we've had to really put our thinking caps on and say, how can we retain this group so that they want to stay with us and they feel engaged? One thing we've done that I think has been creative is that we're a big company, and so we can create the image that you're moving from job to job without leaving a company. And so for those high performers, we can create opportunities for them so they want to stay with us, but they still get that sense of fulfillment of changing and having to develop new skills and get new experiences. But it's a day-to-day challenge.
It's interesting. And Rita, you're at the other end of the spectrum, right? Dealing entirely with millennials, right?
And I'm much more optimistic, I guess, than maybe the general thinking on millennials. And I don't know if it's just because I've had the opportunity to work with some really bright and very wonderful kids, and they've all been. Because it's more like a family, I think there's something about a small business that's just struggling along. Everybody can sort of get on the same page and be part of that struggle, and there's a culture that develops. And my place in the culture was the only person from healthcare. They were all from technology, or they came in as an intern, so they were all very eager to learn things. So I was able to mentor and sort of nurture them almost in a way that they were seeking that out. And it was more because of my expertise, not so much my role in the company. Now, though, that we're becoming larger, we have over 30 employees. For a long time, we were, around 10 people. Some of that is starting to give way, and we're having to bring in some levels, and it's become very difficult to really determine who is going to be the best manager, the best leader of a certain team or group, and how we give those opportunities and how we reward achievements. And so we're facing some of the things that a big company has, and trying to make good decisions, but also trying to be selective about the kinds of young people that we want to maintain in the company, and give those opportunities too. So it is challenging to really kind of understand the motivation and what is important to this younger generation of workers, not things that were important to me at that age. And I think just your comments are helpful as we try to think through some of those challenges.
I've had kind of an interesting experience because I co-founded this business with my son. We were different generations and different genders, and it actually worked so well because we would take a problem and we would really look at it from two kind of distinct points of view. And it's just been a very interesting experience to see, the value of having two different perspectives on a single problem. So I'd like to ask, what about the kind of skills now that are needed in this new economy? I mean, here we are in a totally different world in a way. Are the skills of the leader, are they just staying the same? Or are there different skills needed in this new economy? And Danita, I know when you and I talked, you mentioned that emotional intelligence had surfaced as a top skill.
Absolutely. I think with the increasing amount of diversity in the workforce, there are new leadership skills that are going to be required. I think with newer technology and managing people that are all over the globe, there are new skills that are required. When I left, or when I arrived at SoCalGas, one of the important things to me as I looked at the company was how diverse it was. And it was great for me, and I think you guys will appreciate this in the room. Sempra Energy, our parent company, is one of 21 Fortune 500 companies that's led by a female CEO. That was important to me. That said that a woman could come into a male-dominated business in energy and rise to the top. So that was a big check for me. Okay, I like that a lot. Another thing I think that's important is understanding how to manage a workforce that embraces technology, and they're spread out all over the place. So we have a territory of about 20,000 square foot miles, right? And so we've got people all over the place. You're not under one roof where the boss is there and everybody's there. It's like, how do you manage people that are in different locations, sometimes different time zones? That becomes very challenging. And I also think that an important skill is understanding the different ways that people think and the different ways that people want to be led. You can't treat everybody the same and expect to get their peak performance out of them. And so figuring out how to lead a team, but at the same time, motivate and inspire individuals to perform at their peak performance is really important. And I think we talked about this last night a little bit, or this morning, kind of transactional leadership versus transformational leadership. In my early part of my career, it was all about the metrics. It was about the metrics, it was about the numbers, it was about winning the deal, it was about negotiating. And I think as I've gotten older, I understand, and we were talking about this, winning people's hearts and connecting with them and motivating and inspiring and wanting them to want to perform under your leadership has become very important. So that's kind of the emotional intelligence that I've learned later in my career that I think is so important. And I think people that can combine the technical knowledge and the functional knowledge with that kind of emotional intelligence, those are the people that you will remember as those are the best bosses, those are the best leaders, those are the people that I want to follow, those are the people that can change the world. So definitely a different set of skills that are required.
Right, right. Rita, what do you think?
Well, in a small company that stresses flexibility and being nimble and not having a strategic plan, having, emphasis on these core competencies, so everybody, rushes to, to complete a new capability, add some new technology features to a platform. You want at the same time instill that there has to be good judgment at every junction, or you really can go off the rails. And that balancing act, I think, has been the most difficult aspect of it. So you want all that enthusiasm and that flexibility and just ways to look at what the customer needs, meet the challenge, be very customer driven, but at the same time be somewhat reflective and look at the impact of what you're doing and each decision and the judgment required. And do you have the judgment to make that decision? So I've spent a lot of time with when to X, when to escalate an issue, when you should make a decision. That seems to be the toughest thing. There's no manual on that. There's no rules. It's really just a judgment, and we've spent a lot of time on that. So we try to reward. We call it thinking like an entrepreneur, and we start meetings. We go around the room if we call them all hands meetings. That's when all 30 gather in one room. We only do it about once a month, but we start with our core values, and one of them is acting like entrepreneurs, responding to customer demands, and they all give an example of when they did that. And so they all have usually a good example of making a good judgment call. And I think that simple little thing, and then if there's been something really extraordinary, we will occasionally give an award or we'll give a shout out to somebody. That's really reinforcing that it does get down to having good judgment. It's a very hard thing it's hard to lead a group into making good judgment calls. That's a very challenging part of leadership, and I think we're looking to them to help each other do that.
And leading by example, I think is very important in that sense too, that people can draw upon past experiences of how you handled or how you exercise good judgment. And I think it's also important to signal to employees it's okay if you fail. Right? It's okay if you fail, dust yourself off, get back up, but it's not the end of the world. So I think having that risk tolerance and signaling to people, it's okay to fail is very important in this new economy.
Right, exactly. Well, it's interesting, as I was thinking about this question, I thought, gosh, a lot of these qualities that I think are necessary to lead in this economy are kind of qualities that women have naturally. The multitasking, the nurturing, the good judgment, you name them one by one. And I've been involved, as Patty mentioned, with the International Women's Forum Leadership Foundation. And we've taken 35 young women a year from 14 different countries and trained them a week at Harvard Business School, a week at INSEAD, and then also through our global conference at IWF, and paired them with a mentor somewhere in the world. And I know, Rita, you've been a mentor before for that organization. And it's interesting because a lot of companies are looking to us to train these women who they have very high hopes of and expectations of, and are willing to pay the entire amount to have us train them outside the realm of their regular organization, that they recognize that maybe women have not only natural abilities, but really benefit and really learn a lot from training. So kind of my final question is, what about, do you think women are better suited to lead in this new economy, or do you share that view with me, or do you think it's just a set of qualities?
I don't think I could make a general statement, but I think women are, in many cases, better equipped to make some of those judgment calls and to bring the teams together and to get the collective thinking that's required to make good decisions. And that's really what it's all about. The technology has tremendous potential for good. It has tremendous potential to do some very bad things. in the healthcare area. Your health data is now going into a lot of data warehouses, and there is potential to do some really, I think, unethical, if not, really damaging aspects. So I think that women are maybe more sensitive to some of those things, and are not afraid to, to point them out. I see that more really coming from women than I do from some of my male colleagues. And I'm going back, this isn't just related to the company I'm with now. I was with United Health Group, and we had 5 billion health records that we had in our database, and there were differing views on what to do with that data, and there were a few women that really, I think, stood up for the ethics involved in that. And that's just one example, but I do think that women, if not better, at least extremely important to the equation. I think anytime you have a room that's all men making decisions, it's just not going to be as good a decision because their perspective will be too similar, that you need the broadest perspective available, and in all kinds of diversity. If it's related to particularly something as personal as people's health, if you only have one type of experience in that room, if you don't have mothers and children represented at the table, that decision will probably not be as good and as well informed.
I agree. I think women are uniquely qualified to take on many of these new leadership challenges. I think our challenge as women is that we don't embrace the power that we have. When you think about the numbers that we represent, the purchasing decisions that we represent, if we want to make a change, we can make a change. It's just about pulling our resources together and deciding that we're going to do it. I sometimes hit myself that I didn't come up with the idea of Spanx, right? Ingenious idea, very successful woman, and her market is all women. But if you think about yeah, exactly, standing up high. When you think about women and the fact that there are only 21 female Fortune 500 CEOs, what if we decided as women to make decisions based upon who took women serious and recruited more women to their boards? What kind of power would we have if we did that? We want to elect Hillary Clinton to be our next president. We can do that. We have the numbers, we have the power. But I think it's about us coming together to collaborate more, partner more, unify our funds and our resources, and deciding that we want to do it. And I think we as women try to boil the ocean. We try to do so much for so many people, and I think what has to happen is that we've got to take and narrow down what our few priorities are and really make a showing there, and then start to spread out. But we're a force to be had with.
Yes, exactly. Well, I agree, and I want to end on one final statistic that I found really interesting. I found this a little while ago, but I went back and it said in 1971 there were no women who were Supreme Court justices. There were no women cabinet members, no women governors, no women FBI agents, no women Ivy League presidents, and no women VP or higher at Avon, which was essentially a woman's company. And headhunters said, lamented that it was easier to put a man on the moon than a woman in the corner office. Wow. So that's just 43 years ago, and in many of our lifetimes. And so it's exciting to see where we are today, and even more exciting to see if we, as Danita said, if we get focused, where we can go in the future. I'd like to open it up to questions.
Hi, I thought your panel was great. Further to the last comment you made, Kathy, and you were all talking about, I'm involved with a nonprofit called ASTIA, which was founded by one of the only women on the founding team of Cisco. And she gathered data, and we've been gathering it now for 15 years. 10% of all the venture capital in the United States goes to women-led companies. So we've defined women-led companies to be where there's a woman on the founding team, and it could be one of these things, doesn't have to be all of them. A woman in the cap table in a significant way, like 5% or more of the stock. A woman in the officer team, a woman director. So we've been working with this data a lot, and what we've really discovered is that women-led companies that are also extremely diverse have a higher ROI than other companies. So Astia right now is, and I'm very involved in this, forming a fund, a venture capital fund, to raise $100 million so that we can actually put our money where our mouths are. We have been for 15 years with women-led companies, like you when you were at Wiki, and you with BioIQ, and you with your capital advisors, putting together angel syndicates, sort of like Golden Seeds in New York. But we've decided that if our thesis is really right, it's a good enough thesis for a venture capital fund. So I put it back to you on diverse-led leadership teams, including women. Do you think the money follows the diversity, or does that sound like a platitude to you?
I'll take that and speak from a Sempra perspective, or SoCal Gas. So we embrace diversity. We think it's important, and we have put a real big focus around our supply chain. And 45% of our procurement dollars last year went to diverse business enterprises. And what I'm trying to challenge the team now to say is, what was the business case for that? It's great that we spent 45% of our procurement dollars, but were we able to save money? Were we able to deliver a better product? Did our quality increase? And so I don't think the business case has been made, or at least articulated, where diversity, I think diversity is a strength. I think most people can see it and connect with it, but I don't think that business case has been made, so that if you had a venture capital fund that said, we're going to invest in these very diverse businesses where the ROI is high, the data would have to be there. And I don't think it's been articulated. That's my 2 cents.
Right, and that, as we're going around trying to raise this fund, and we have interest from Morgan Stanley, Goldman
right.
Sachs, we actually have the data.
Mike.
And the data is not just on getting the company funded, or getting it public, or getting a great M&A result, thank you, a liquidity result. As you know, I don't need a goddamn microphone.
I
do. It's also about how long the company lasts. For example, I had the pleasure and the horror of being a corporate finance and securities lawyer in Silicon Valley in the go-go 90s. And I took a company public that probably should remain nameless. Are we online?
Yes.
Yes, I'm not going to name the company. That was co-founded by a man and a woman. And when I started to get them their financing, they kept the source code for the software in their bedroom in a trunk. And I said, we're going to have to clean this up. The woman, the wife, finally got out of the picture, and the husband built the company around what I would just call euphemistically a frat boy culture. That company went up 60% the first day of trading and was in bankruptcy, not because of the technology crash, but because of its own ineptitude 18 months later. And the reason it was is because we had to defend lawsuits like for wet t-shirt contests that were staged at sales kickoffs. And if you don't think Silicon Valley's sexist, come talk to me, I'll tell you how sexist it is. So it's the ROI data we have for this fund, to go back to your point, show me that this is where the money is, okay? It has to be measured on a much broader spectrum. How long does the company last? How long does it remain diverse? How long does it have a woman in some kind of, one or more women in a leadership role? And so I do believe the data is there, but, and by the way, we are getting ready for a first close. So we are convincing people we can give them profit on this fund. But I agree with you, it's hard. And it's hard to get past the male mindset to get people to believe that data is right.
Because if they folks believed it, we'd have more females in corner offices, we'd have a lot more female elected officials, and yeah. So.
But just, anecdotally, I see it every day in my business. I mean, we have a small business now of 12 people. One person's from Nigeria, one person's from China, one person's from Korea, on and on. And it's interesting to see how those varying perspectives really come together and help you fashion and solve problems and open up markets,
What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I'm looking at it from the other side. We've built this successful little company that now is the darling of a lot of private equity firms, and they're coming out of the woodwork. And one of the screens I use in terms of who we're going to have a serious conversation with is how many women they have, if they have any managing partners. And there was one very prominent.
You must have a small list, sweetie. There's not many women in venture capital.
Exactly.
It's
But the
disgusting.
smart ones are putting a woman on the team that talks to us, and it's something that I've talked to my partners about, that we want to see diversity of thinking among anyone that would become our business partners. And it's a minority position that we're looking at. We've been able to grow organically at really incredible rates. So taking on some growth capital is a big decision, and we want to look at those firms. So I'm excited to hear that that's even happening. And I think from where we are, we can also help push the change by when I ask, well, how many women associates do you have? And I do. I just
You have no idea how much power you have. There are venture funds putting women in the MD slots because there are more women-led companies that are getting toward liquidity events. And when you go to pick your bankers or your M&A advisors, you use the same power, okay? And you go to your commercial banking relationship, you say, show me somebody who's gonna manage my account that's a woman. It is in the face of business all over the globe now that powerful women like the three of you that are running important businesses have buying power, like you alluded to. But the financial services industry, as far as I'm concerned, is a backwater.
Right.
Tell us how you really feel. I have a question. It's not quite as exciting as that. I work for the federal government, and I lead the IT information management for an agency. And one of our biggest challenges is protecting our data, protecting information security against hackers. Like we said, IT also drives bad behavior. So do you have, I'm just wondering if you could comment, do you have similar challenges? And what type of investment? Is it a large amount of money that you have to put out there to protect your information?
Absolutely, especially personal health information. And I think, as I said before, is probably the most private thing. I mean, a lot of us, we share everything with a spouse or with friends, family. That's one thing that we probably hold most closely. And so anytime you're entrusted with that, you have to make sure that it's going to be protected. And we actually will not take on some business relationships when we don't feel that a business partner, even a big name, a big laboratory company, where we see there's been some sloppy data privacy, data security practices, we actually will pull away from those kinds of relationships or demand certain levels of upgrades. We keep no data on any any of our computers in our office. Very few people can touch the personal data. There is incredible logs. It goes to a very secure cloud environment that is so protected that they even, it's guarded 24 hours a day. There's also redundancies and such that you use for protection, but it's something that we just see as one of the pillars of our business, and so we do spend a lot of money, even in terms of getting advice in doing business partner contracts and such, and then we train all of our employees, no matter what an intern was doing in our little company, and the fact that they could never touch any personal health information. They had to go through the training on data security. It was just a requirement. And it's probably the environments that I came from also. Large health companies have so much at stake, but I felt we didn't have the resources to defend against a breach, so the best way to defend and to mitigate the risk was just to not take the risk. But I think it's more heightened in healthcare, but any company that isn't training everyone in the company on basic data security and protection of the customer's privacy, I think is really taking a huge risk.
I would echo everything you said around the customer, but in our particular line of business, the data security around our pipeline infrastructure is also very important. So protecting those assets and access to that information is very important. And managing the communications team, those are one of the scenarios that we have to play out if the what if, right? What if something happened? How would we respond and how would we react?
And same with us. I mean, I think next to healthcare, your financial records
Yes.
are the next most sensitive thing to be, accessed. And so we're very careful with what we do, and luckily we're lucky we have in-house. We have someone who programmed the Mars rover at JPL, and we've got a whole series of protocols that you go through. But I worry about this with the government.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just want to say, I think we're stifled in the government a little bit because we have a lot of security requirements we have to meet before using new technologies and so forth. So I do think it stifles us a little bit, and it costs us so much money. And I wish sometimes that would just go away.
It's not.
I have one follow-up story that's just anecdotal to yours about asking for women in the organization. At one point, my husband and I were going in, this was probably 25 years ago. My husband and I were going into a big name bank, and they knew that I was coming in, and so they grabbed a woman who was like at a secretarial station, said, tomorrow you put on a suit, you have to be in this meeting because Kathy Checky will ask, do you have a woman on your team? And she found me, I heard the story like 5 years ago. She came up and introduced herself, and she said, that was my start at the bank. Was that I got in that room and I conducted myself correctly and everything like that, but they said, Kathy Checky will ask.
That's fabulous.